Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And, you know, yesterday was such an interesting video for me. I just kind of did this video on a whim, and I just sat down and responded to the comment that I got. And you guys, your comments in response to that video were so just kind, and I don't know, I just loved reading the comments in response to it. And so I was like, you know, I think that's more of what I need to do on this channel, is just kind of sit down and like whatever I'm thinking about that day is what I need to talk about on this channel. You know, like whatever thoughts are going through my head, whatever conversations I've had with people, whatever like maybe learning experience I've had that day or something I've passed on to somebody else is maybe something that I will share as well. Tucker just ran by and hit the light, so the camera probably went like that. But anyway, so today I want to talk about a conversation that I had with a friend of mine earlier. And if I get to it, I have a meditation I want to read about fear from the Codependent No More meditation book, because it's such a great meditation, and I think that we could just talk about fear forever and ever and ever, because I think most of us are driven deep down inside by some forms of fear in our life, which is why in 12-step programs, fear is something that we inventory and we look at. And he is just doing circles around the house. Tucker, you're having a day, aren't you? They've been outside, they've been chasing birds and squirrels in the backyard. They have had the best day ever. So anyway, but I wanted to talk about a conversation that I had earlier with a friend of mine. I met up with a friend of mine, a sober friend of mine, and we were sitting around talking, and she had had a friend that just passed away like in the last 2 weeks. And so we were talking about it, and, you know, she was telling me about, like, what led up to it, and it was a friend of hers that had passed away from cancer. And she was talking about, like, you know, and I had known about this friend, and we had talked about her, and, you know, her kind of having started the grieving process before her friends got, like, really, really sick at the end. But it was kind of a passing that wasn't expected to happen when it did. Like, they thought that she would be here for a lot longer, but she entered hospice, and then she passed away. And so she was talking about how, like, then the memorial was, like, she passed away on, like, a Tuesday, then the memorial was that weekend, and then it was just over. And she was like, I don't really know what to do with myself. And I said, you know, this is an interesting part of grieving that we never talk about, right? Like, or if we do, we kind of just skirt around the issue because we don't really know what to do with it. And what's interesting is, like, I was telling her about my experience with my mother, you know? That my mother went into the hospital, and then she, you know, went into a coma, and then she was in this coma for like 6 weeks, and then, you know, or almost 2 months, and then she passed away. And so it was like, it was this very like critical time of my life, and everything was just like this, you know, there was just like so much attention on my mom, and like the tragedy of what was going on. And then she passed away, and then it was like, you know, several days of planning the funeral and calling people and putting pictures together and making CDs of her favorite music and on and on and on, right? And then there was the viewing, and then there was the funeral, and then there was nothing. It was just over, right? And it was really, really hard for me. And it was interesting because so many people at my mom's funeral said, you know, like, I'm going to call you next week. We're going to go to lunch. These were mostly like people that were, you know, family friends of ours for years and years and years. And, you know, they said, I'm going to call you next week. We're going to get together all the time. These are people that had been surrounding the tragedy of my mother's illness and her passing for weeks. Like, they had been a big part of that for a long time, right? So it was kind of like this whole sinking ship theory. If you don't know what that is, it means that, like, you know, people that are going down in a sinking ship together, or like this, you know, they're survivors, that they are forever connected kind of like by that, right? It's like, you know, I know this is going to sound strange, but it's like, you know, going to summer camp one year and being like so connected to those people, or, you know, like maybe like, I don't know, a trip your senior year in high school with like your band or something, you know, and that you're really connected with those people. The same thing is like when you go through a tragedy with somebody and you go through an illness, and, you know, a lot of these people were coming over to my mom's house before she went into the hospital and, you know, reading recovery texts to her and doing crossword puzzles and watching movies with her because we had to have somebody here 24 hours a day. And then in the hospital, it was the same thing, you know, even though my mom was in a coma and she was in ICU, my aunt made sure that there was always somebody there 24 hours a day, always. And so it was, you know, and like me going in and out and kind of like, you know, like And I wasn't the greatest at that stuff, you know, and like going in and out and being like, oh, hi, how are you? And it's great to see you. And, you know, and so like there was like this camaraderie. And then when my mom passed away, it was like this cinching, you know, especially I would say with my closest family, like my aunt at the time and my uncle and my cousin and her husband. And we were all just like really, really tied together. And, you know, like that is one thing that my cousin and I have really had to make an effort about. She just called me up a couple days ago and invited me over for Easter. And, you know, I was like, because we made kind of this commitment to each other because now it's just the two of us. You know, her parents are gone. My dad is still alive, but that's my dad and my stepmom over here. You know, my cousin's parents are both gone and my mom is gone. And from our side of the family, that's it. And so we've made this commitment, you know, to continue to do holidays together and call each other. And we're very close anyway. But what was hard was after the funeral, I was just left with this overwhelming feeling of like, I don't know what to do next. And I've talked about this on my vlog, but it's kind of, so it's kind of, I don't know, it's funny sometimes when I tell it and other times it's endearing to me, but it's just kind of this, it was the beginning of my grieving that I didn't really realize at the time. So, you know, like my aunt had this kind of like after funeral get together thing with a bunch of food and everybody was there and we were standing around and, you know, talking and hanging out and eating food and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, my dad and my stepmom went over there and it was a lot of like college friends of because my mom and my aunt and my dad went to college together. And my mom's sister and my dad went to college. They were the same year. And then my mom was like 2 years below them. And, so it was a lot of like college friends that my dad knew. And so like they kind of like all got to hang out and talk and stuff. And at some point it was like my friends were kind of like, I had like 3 or 4 friends around me and they were kind of lingering just because they didn't know really like, what do we do for Peter? Like there's no textbook about this stuff. Like this is the problem is we don't, you know, say how to do this stuff. And thank God I had a friend of mine. I mean, I feel horrible for what she went through, but thank God that she was there for me. My very close friend, her mother had passed away 1.5 years before. She literally walked me through the whole process. I mean, she was like, this is what the viewing is going to be like. This is what you say to people. If you don't want to stand there anymore, you get somebody, I'll stand there for you. This is what you do. It just, none of it matters. This is how you're going to get through it. And she literally walked me through everything. And so that day, you know, after the funeral, we were standing there and she said to me, you know, what do you want to do? She kept on saying, like, what do you want us to do? And she was like, you tell us, we'll do whatever you want. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I just didn't know. Like, I didn't want to leave, but I didn't want to stay. And I knew, like, I had this, like, innate feeling inside of me that the second that I left, it was over. And I almost, like, weirdly, like, didn't want to let go of that time. You know, it had been, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it had been, like, these several months of kind of, like, paying homage to my mother, so to speak, and like our life together. And then it was just over. Like it was just over. Like, and the funeral was over and I knew everybody was going to go back to what they were doing and there was going to be no nursing visits and there were going to be no more, what can we do for you? Here's some pictures for the funeral. Hey, do you need me to make a CD? Can we cater some food? Like I knew that was done. And you know, everybody said, we're going to call. And now my close friends did, right? But other than that, like people that, like family friends, I didn't hear from them again. Some of them I still haven't heard from to this day, you know, and it's been 11 years. I don't fault them for that. I don't, not whatsoever. I don't think we know in that position what to say to people to pick up the phone, you know, and it's like one of the coolest things that's happened is one of my aunt and my mom's very closest friends from high school all the way through lives in my neighborhood. And so we pass each other when we're like walking, you know, in the summer, or she'll walk by my house or I'm driving out and I'll see her there. And so we'll stand and talk and she'll ask about Caroline, my cousin, or, you know, she came to my aunt and uncle's funerals and it's nice to have a connection to somebody from the past. I wish we had, you know, more open communication on how to talk to one another and what we need after a funeral. Excuse me. And like how to ask for like, hey, can we go out to lunch? Because I think when you're the one grieving, you don't want to bother anybody. At least that's been my experience. And when you're the person on the other side, you don't want to bother them. So then just time goes by, and then nobody reaches out to anybody. And it's this very kind of uncomfortable silence that nobody knows what to do with. And I really think that in the whole grieving process, the hardest part for me, you know, people would say, you know, like, excuse me, people would say to me that like the funeral was hard or this was hard or the viewing was hard. The hardest part for me was when it was all over and I didn't really know what to do next. And you know, that night after the funeral, then after the party or the get together, I got all these cookies and cheese and I put it in this big Ziploc bag and I went back to my apartment and, you know, my friends went home and I was sitting there and I can remember I watched the true life story of the Judds, Love Can Build a Bridge, and I sat there and I ate all these cookies and all this cheese and I just sobbed, and it was the beginning of my grieving process, and that was really, really healthy for me to just sit there and allow myself to cry and to feel and to miss her and to realize that that was the beginning of my life without my mother. And me living in that kind of factual world was really, really healthy for me. I wish that we could write a textbook, but you know, the thing is that everybody's passing is different. Everybody's relationship with each member of the person that passed is different. It's a friend, it's a spouse, it's a family member, it's a mother, it's a father. Everybody's relationship with their mother is different. Everybody's relationship with their friend is different. So you can't write a script for any of this. But the one piece of advice that I would give you is allow yourself to feel your feelings. Allow yourself to tell other people how you're feeling. And, you know, if you're somebody on the outside looking in to somebody that's grieving, reach out, keep in touch, and let them know you care. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.